looking globally, what the United Nations Development Program says is that the COVID-19 pandemic has become far more than a health crisis. It's now affecting societies and economies at their very core. And I think we all feel that happening wherever we are. The pressure to revive economies, however, especially to do it as quickly as possible, makes it tempting for some policymakers to set aside environmental and other regulations that are seen to raise the cost of doing business. And in fact, we've already seen these kinds of moves in the United States, in Canada, in India, Australia, and South Africa, among others, which have already moved to ease environmental regulations for the sake of allowing businesses to recover more quickly. And this really risks a worse normal rather than a better normal for all of us. By the way, the other one that came up in the Philippines recently was even the easing up, and this was really some kind of a midnight insertion in the economic stimulus bill, which would actually suspend the powers of the Philippine Competition Commission, which would allow mergers and acquisitions to happen without the regulation by the Philippine Competition Commission. So we could end up with bigger monopolies if you don't watch out. And so again, we are actually risking a worse normal here. So we have to not let our guard down like that. So while the impact of the pandemic will vary from country to country, it will most likely increase poverty and inequalities at a global scale. And this is the fear of the UN. That will make the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, even more urgent. The new normal, as we can expect, would be more physical distancing, more closures and scaled down businesses. In fact, we've already had hundreds of businesses declaring bankruptcy and shutting down for good. As we said, there'll be more work from home, but there'll be more online retail services and other online services to actually dampen the demand for public and private transport. So that would mean that perhaps we will see less vehicles on the road, but it will raise demand for internet services, which are, as we all know, not very good in this country. It will also raise demand for e-commerce and other ICT products, as well as logistics. In banking, there's going to be much more digital money and banking transactions, and banks will really need to transform their business models. Of relevance to the blue economy are these more localized value chains, where there's now even more urban agriculture happening and home food production. And the other observation is that now you see a lot more of our produce, fresh produce, coming more from nearby rather than from distant places like Baguio or Benguet. What about the blue economy? Well, I looked at what the Food and Agriculture Organization has to say about the various impacts that have already been manifesting. First, of course, the closure of food service sectors, meaning restaurants, hotels, which has impacted tremendously on the fresh fish and shellfish supply chains. And by the way, of total production and total consumption of the blue economy products, or at least the fishery products, 45% are in fresh form, mostly in these food service sectors. Now, overall, because of lower incomes with work standstills, there was reduced consumer demand, which led to closures in fish and seafood processing activities, feeling that reduction in demand. Logistical difficulties, again, because of the lockdown in many transport facilities, hampered in particular salmon, tuna, and other industries, which tend to be shipped, especially by air. And similarly affected were supplies of seeds and feeds and vaccines and all the other aquaculture-related items, which impacted on aquaculture. Now, the reduced demand in general has led to lower prices, which has discouraged our capture fisher folk. So that has led either to a halt or a reduction of capture fisheries. Now, the silver lining there is that it helps the fish stocks to replenish. In aquaculture, the effect of all this unsold produce is to increase the fish stocks, and therefore this will require higher feeding costs, but also a risk of higher fish mortalities because of the overcrowding in those aquaculture ponds. As we already said at the outset, the slump in international trade in general has reduced trade in fishery products as well. And again, here, the statistic is that 38% of total production of fisheries products are traded internationally. Now, in some places, in many areas, in fact, including ours here in Los Baños, Laguna, suppliers have found ways to directly link to consumers. And in our case, we have online produce markets sprouting up. And so we can now order for direct delivery fresh fish coming to our home. Now, one of the things that can be observed here is that women are especially impacted by all of this, because women play very prominent roles, especially in the post-harvest supply chains of fisheries products, be it in actual vending or processing and other work done on the fisheries products. So they themselves are now, the women are particularly lost. Well, let me just conclude with the general prognosis of the Food and Agriculture Organization, which said there are still many uncertainties ahead, particularly with regard to the duration and severity of the pandemic. But if we have a prolonged market downturn, which is still, anybody's guess right now, this is likely to introduce long-term transformations to the blue economy sector. And it's for the rest of this webinar series to actually flesh out and get the details of how exactly will these transformations happen. And of course, we have to look more long-term. It was mentioned already that fisheries only accounts for 1.3% of our GDP. If you count all our exclusive economic zones, our territory is 4/5 water and only 1/5 land. And why is it that our economic activities that could come from the water part of our territory, meaning our inland and marine water resources, only making up about 1.5% of GDP? Clearly, there's a lot of scope for much more of economic production, but obviously we would like that economic production to be sustainable economic production. But what that tells me is there's just so much more we can do to raise the incomes of our fisher folk, if only we put more attention to it. So it's a vicious circle here. People are saying, well, we don't want to give too much attention because it's only 1.5% of GDP. But we have to realize that the tremendous potential there is in the blue economy to raise its contribution to GDP much, much more than that. And therefore, it deserves the attention that we need to be giving, especially at this time. So I hope that government can take note of that, there is really a need to help this sector because there is so much potential for growth there and for increasing incomes of the people, especially those who already are starting from being the least advantaged in our society. If we've been hearing about green jobs, there's such a thing as blue jobs that can actually be created precisely by the deliberate public investments in improving our marine and even inland waters resources. So, establishment of seagrass beds and so on, whatever else it will take, fortifying our corals and expanding our coral areas. These are things that can be done as part of, as I said, working towards a greater contribution of the blue economy to our overall economy. And jobs can be created deliberately. I recall instances in the past where our government created jobs directly simply by having people wear blue shirts and then sweep the sides of the streets. And as if that was the only kind of employment we could give people who need the jobs. These are very productive and long-term beneficial jobs, which could in fact be created through public investments. So we simply have to be more deliberate about looking at a bluer economy and a greener economy and create these kinds of jobs that will be really a win-win in that sense. No? You create jobs in the short term, but you also create sustainability in the longer term. Yes, absolutely. I guess that's what we had in mind when we were talking about creating blue jobs rather than just green jobs. By the way, in the United States, the green jobs were usually associated with the renewable energy sector. In this case, we would like blue jobs to be created both by public and private investments in, again, building up our blue economy resources. I mean, the kinds that Judah mentioned are in fact what I was trying to get at earlier. What are these opportunities for employing especially our coastal population? who would be willing to work rather than just receive outright cash. If the government can just direct what is just being given away as cash into these kinds of employment that will have a beneficial effect for all.
I just want to chime into this conversation about deliberately creating jobs in the blue economy. Actually, for the year 2020, we have included in the budget priorities framework a certain amount, although the exact figure escapes me at this point, which is really devoted to coastal marine resource protection, management and protection. One of the problems that we have seen, the issues that we have seen with respect to coastal marine resources, is that this one is already actually one of those devolved tasks to the LGUs, but the problem is the ERA is actually does not consider the coastal marine areas, not even the inland waters, in terms of the factors to consider in the IRA distribution. And so we have already, recognized that there is this mismatch between the responsibilities of LGUs, especially those with the coastal areas, and those, they have to be the one to protect it, to hire yung mga patrolling, policing, etc. And so in the 2020 is we actually put in place some money, of course lodged with the DNR, but this is really for the LGUs, for the municipal, for the coastal municipalities, so that they can tap this one. And so this is actually one of the things that we are really thinking of going forward, that we can leverage on fiscal resources of national government and link it up with the resources of the LGUs. Of course, the other side of the story, of course, is the commitment of local government units to really protect their coastal marine resources. I guess this is where advocacy campaigns really come in, and I'm glad that there are many here that are committed to having a bluer economy. Yeah, I will actually touch on this later when I speak. But just to say that no, there will be no easing of regulations. The DNR secretary actually sits as member of the IATF, and when we came up with the document of We Recover as One, that is really their major advocacy. Of course, NEDA itself is also advocating for SDG 12, which is what we're using in order to as a linchpin for many of these environmental concerns. Now, restrictions on the movement of people during the quarantine protocols have caused limited patrolling, policing, and ground validation activities. This was also mentioned earlier in the Q&A. And we think that this could contribute to increase illegal encroachment, illegal and unprotected and unregulated fishing. On the other hand, we also note that this quarantine has enhanced individual behavior towards preservation and ecological restoration. Not to mention that there were not many who are going into these coastal tourism destinations, and so we're seeing a restoration of many of these sites. We are seeing that many of them are actually starting to recover their pristine state. Now, this pandemic has also emphasized for us the role of the environment in improving public health and sustaining economic development. First of all, we see that there's an important role of protection, conservation, and rehabilitation of natural resources and the biodiversity in helping mitigate and prevent zoonotic diseases. This COVID-19 is not the first zoonotic disease that we've had. We've had several, but I think this one brings home the point that we need to take a look at the role of environmental protection and this prevalence of zoonotic diseases. We need to adopt innovative technologies for enforcement and monitoring. So like I said, Because of the ECQ, I think we had less people policing and patrolling, and so we need to have we need to come up with innovative ways of doing this, so that we don't compromise environmental protection because of this the need for the ECQ. And then we also need to take advantage of the opportunities for sustainable livelihood and economic activities from fisheries and other marine-based industry towards the blue economy. And these are the specific strategies for the fisheries sector. First, pursue sustainable and resilient fish and marine-based industries for blue economy development. So this includes the development and promotion of innovative technologies and practices with the proper sanitary and safety protocols. We still need to impose those even at the production sites fisheries, improving market access, of course, and then climate resilient post-harvest facilities. We need to enhance the capacity of farmers and fisher folk to adopt new and better technologies. So we need to provide efficient transport and logistics system to link production areas. Now, this includes establishing community fish landing centers. Okay, this will serve as landing and fish trading hubs. And then hopefully they will also have the post-harvest equipment and facilities to enable fisher folk to preserve the good quality of their fish and fishery products para hindi asin ang pang-preserve. And then we need to strengthen online marketing of agriculture and fisheries products, including the establishment of online or digital channels for transactions and delivery services. Next, is really important that we organize the small farmers and fisher folks into formal groups. In fact, going forward, there will be inducement towards this so that many of the assistance programs to be given by the DA and the BFAR will actually be given to organized fisher folks. So we want clustering arrangements because we know that we want to maximize the economies of scale. We want to take advantage of communal inputs as well. Of course, we need to improve fisheries productivity within ecological limits, pursuing ecosystems approach. And then this one is something that has been in the drawing board, but we hope that we can really start on this very, very soon, which is to upscale natural capital accounting, including ecosystem valuation. The thing is, we really need to have this information system in order to enable, this evidence-based decision-making, a very informed decision-making, so that we're able to really think of the better alternatives, assessing the trade-offs, and then hopefully get to our desired outcome, which is to generate income, employment, and create wealth for the country. Rest assured that we are not compromising the future for this immediate present. Of course, all our energies is also, there should be also a lot of this energies devoted to this immediate future, but we think that this can be done without compromising the future.